Hello. As we begin to work on our step-by-step instructions project, I wanted to talk us through a few pieces to consider, particularly around the topic of audience awareness when writing instructions. So for our specific project, all of the instructions are about writing towards a beginner audience. This means that you really have to kind of step back from knowing something about what you're writing about and think of it from that angle or the perspective of the person that truly does not know. And there are several ways that you can do this. One, it helps to just start by writing out all the steps that you think there are, and then have someone try and follow the steps. See if they're able to do it. And it's really helpful if it's someone who truly is not familiar with whatever it is. So maybe it's an instruction set for how to set something up on the computer. We'll have someone that is not technical savvy, right, get on. If I was doing it, I would ask my mom because she does not do well with technology. And so it would be a real test of how strong the instructions were if she could follow it. If I was doing a recipe, I could hand it off to one of my friends who does not cook at all. Like she doesn't even boil water. If she could follow it, then I know that they were pretty strong. And what I would pay attention to if I did that would be to see if there was any places where they get stuck, or they have questions, or they make mistakes, because those are places then you know that you can elaborate. Another way of thinking this is to really step back and think of how you can kind of break down some of the tasks or define pieces that someone may not be familiar with. So again, this is really thinking about the language and how clear is it going to be. If I tell someone who is not familiar in the kitchen to bring whatever it is, maybe bring the, I don't know, bring the fruit up to a boil or a rolling boil. If you're not someone who cooks, you're not going to know what that means or what that looks like. And so again, it's really about that stepping back. There's all kinds of assumptions I think that get made, and a lot of this has to do with issues of common sense. I think as, maybe not all of us, but most people want to give others benefit of the doubt. And what I mean by that is you want to assume that people have what we call common sense, that you can give them an instruction and they're going to be able to follow it. But we also all know people that we would say do not have common sense. And so if you can kind of think of those people, that you're writing this towards people that truly, like, they just lack common sense. It's hard for them to kind of wrap their heads around pieces. Um, that sometimes can also help just make sure that it's towards that beginner focus, right? You don't want to assume that someone is going to just get or understand what it is that you're telling them to do. You want to kind of break it down. So even if they truly don't understand, they can still follow the instructions and get whatever it is accomplished. Along that same line, part of the reason that we start incorporating images into this project, where we haven't really focused on that with the other projects, is that the reality is pictures help. If any of you have ever tried to put together a new product before and it was this kind of jumbled mess, but then there was pictures. Well, the pictures help clarify what you're supposed to do. Same thing with cooking. If you look at a lot of cooking blogs, they'll break down each step into pictures versus a traditional recipe that doesn't do that. And so really trying to think of, within the steps that you have, what steps most need pictures? Is it going to be helpful for every step? Maybe. Maybe not every step needs it. Maybe there are just some that you know are going to be the more challenging ones, or where you think beginners might get stuck. But those pictures really help illustrate what you're talking about. We, as a society, all the time, if we can't figure out how to do something, we go online and we Google it. Most of the times when we Google, we're going to go to a site that either has pictures describing it, or we're going to go to something like a YouTube video, because we like to see it. We're very visual. We like to have images to show us. And so keep that in mind, again, as you're kind of thinking through and designing your step-by-step instructions, is how can you use pictures to really help demonstrate and illustrate the different steps that your readers would need to take. As far as layout considerations, this is something where you do have to sometimes step away from the traditional to really create a layout that is audience friendly. And what I mean by that, the recipes are a great example. I can pull open a cookbook, even a cookbook for beginners, and it's probably going to have an ingredient list, and then it's probably going to have a steps to follow. There's not going to be pictures or images for each step. There's not going to typically be a lot of explanation for cooking terms. There might be some tips and hints depending on the book, but that's not particularly useful for a true beginner. A true beginner really needs someone to show them and help them with each step. And so something like looking at a more creative, more common, I don't know that's more common, it's becoming more common type of layout for recipes is actually more of a recipe blog style, where someone is literally talking through each of the steps and showing pictures, illustrations, giving tips along the way. Yes, it's a little bit longer, but then remember, it's for a beginner. And so you don't want to give them so much information that it's hard to sift through. But you also want to make sure that the layout that you're using is friendly. Trying to cram a whole recipe onto a single page when it's for a beginner may not be the best approach. It's going to be hard to do that and really make it beginner focused because it's all about the audience for this. Same thing if you're taking some instructions from a manual. So like car manuals are kind of notorious for this. They're notorious for being sort of examples of bad sets of instructions, partially because they're always a little bit jumbled, very technical, and often have very unclear pictures attached. So if you were going to rewrite that for someone who really wanted to understand how to do something simple, maybe how to change a headlight or how to change their car battery, well, you could really take that, break it down, enlarge the font, use clearer pictures, write things in a non-technical language to really make it so a beginner could do that. And so when you're thinking about layout, should it be multiple pages? Should it be something that would be like a poster on a wall if it's a series of like a policy, like shop safety policies, for example, are often in posters on the wall? Should it be something that's a more professional type of document that would be found in a text where someone might actually need to like sign off on it? Would it be something that might appear more like a blog? So you have a lot of creative license and creative freedom when you're writing instructions to really figure out what is going to be a clear format. And clarity needs to be both in the text and visually how clear all of it is. And then, of course, always got to be a little bit cautious of tone. Tone is always kind of something tricky, particularly when you're writing to beginners. You want to use a professional tone always in business technical writing. I mean, that's just a given. However, you also want to make sure that you're breaking down technical language for someone who is that beginner. And so that can be a little bit of a challenge sometimes in figuring out how to describe and explain things in a way where you're breaking them down without sounding condescending. Like you're not trying to offend your audience, you're generally trying to help them. And so you got to be a little bit careful that the instructions for beginners don't start to sound snarky or condescending or sarcastic, because that can be a little bit offensive from the beginner perspective. They don't want to be treated like they're an idiot. They just want to be guided to do something that they don't know anything about or haven't done before. And so try and keep that in mind. Again, that this is a very much an audience-driven project. And so you really have to think through when you're writing your steps how to be aware of the audience, how to keep them in mind, how to integrate pictures to help, how to come up with a layout that's going to work. And you have the ability to make all of those choices. There isn't any sort of strict guideline where I'm going to say you must do it this way. So keep those pieces kind of in the forefront as you begin to work on this project. And of course, this would also be good things to consider when it comes later on to peer review and you're giving each other advice and feedback as well. And as always, of course, reach out to me for further help and have a great day.